I was in the kitchen, baking a cake, when Alice Collins's name flashed on my phone. My 4-year-old daughter, Susie, who'd been playing a game on it, answered the call before I could. I had no idea what was said on the other end, but the next thing I knew, Susie came dashing toward me, her little face lighting up with joy, one of her shoes flying off in the process. "Daddy, guess what? Mommy went bankrupt. That means she can come to my birthday this year." Bankrupt? The call was still connected. Her name was saved in my contacts as ex-wife. The last time Alice called me was around Christmas. She only reached out on holidays, just enough to ask me to play the loving husband in front of her parents. I'd put on the act, sweet-talk them through dinner, hold her hand just long enough for appearances. But the moment we stepped out of her parents' house, she would coldly pull away and head straight to Brian's place. Her car would be stuffed with gifts in the back seat, the passenger seat blanketed with fresh red roses. And I'd be standing outside in the freezing wind, holding the 10 grand she tossed at me as payment for the performance, feeling nothing at all. Because that money would cover 6 months' rent for Susie and me. Now hearing she'd gone bankrupt, I was more puzzled than concerned. Why wasn't she calling her beloved Brian? Her voice was cautious when it came through the phone. "Alex. I don't have a place to stay. I haven't eaten all day. Can I stay with you for a while?" I was about to say, absolutely not. But then Susie tugged on the hem of my shirt. Her big, grape-colored eyes shimmered with hope and silent pleading. "Daddy, please let Mommy stay for my birthday, just this once. All the other kids get to have both their parents with them." I looked down at her, and something twisted in my chest. I knew how deeply Susie longed for her mother's love. And deep down, I knew, Alice did care for Susie. In her own way. Alice used to take Susie to amusement parks, buy her clothes, and spoil her with entire sets of princess surprise toys. But one day, Susie came home with her head down, her voice small and defeated. "I'm not going to bother Mommy anymore," she said. I dropped the spatula right then and stormed out of the kitchen, straight into Alice's upscale house. Without a second thought, I slapped Brian across the face so hard it echoed. Then I shoved his smug face into the toilet bowl and gave his filthy mouth a good rinse. After that, Alice never asked to see Susie again. But today was Susie's birthday. And all she wanted was to have both her parents around. I gave in. "Alice, Susie misses you. You can come over and have dinner with her tonight." There was a long exhale on the other end of the line, relief. The kind that said, "Thank God someone's still willing to take me in." "You're still living in Silverwood Estates, right? I'll head over now." I blinked. "Where's that? I've never even been there." I was renting a modest 2-bedroom in Amber Ridge, close to Susie's preschool. Right outside the gate was a row of mom-and-pop restaurants and bakeries, a far cry from the luxury neighborhood Alice had just mentioned. There was a pause. Then she asked for my current address. Even dressed head to toe in bargain store clothes, Alice still carried herself with that effortlessly striking elegance. The moment she walked in, Susie flung herself at her mother's legs with pure delight. Alice smiled down at her, gently ruffling her hair, but the second her eyes swept across the modest space we lived in, the warmth in her expression cooled noticeably. "This is where you've been letting my daughter live?" My hand froze halfway through making coffee. The place was fully furnished, minimalist, clean, with warm wood tones and thoughtful decor. From the big appliances to the cartoon play mats, everything had been chosen by Susie herself. I paid for all of it. No matter how tight things got, I made sure Susie never felt less than any other kid, whether it was her meals, her clothes, her toys, or the roof over her head. Alice, however, started finding fault as soon as she entered the room. Of course. She and Brian had been living in a 5,000-square-foot mansion. Naturally, this place must have felt small to her. I tossed the freshly brewed coffee into the trash and gently pulled Susie toward me. "Sweetheart, why don't you go check your room? I think Daddy may have hidden your birthday present in there." Her eyes lit up as she squealed with excitement and dashed off. The moment she disappeared into her room, my smile dropped. I turned to Alice, my voice cold and even. "This place? Who was it just now begging to come to this place? You don't even have this kind of place to live in anymore. And you think you have the right to judge me?" Alice immediately pulled herself together, hiding the flicker of embarrassment on her face. After all, she was no longer playing the role of a high-powered executive. Now, she was just a woman who'd gone broke. She sank into the couch, clearly uneasy in her own skin. "You've misunderstood," she said softly. "I meant, Why didn't you move into the house I gave you? I stared at her, genuinely confused. What house? When we divorced, all I had was a duffel bag and a 3-month-old baby. The little money I scraped together came from pawning the watch my parents had given me. Alice's brows pulled into a deep frown. Alex, you gave me a child. Even if I didn't love you, I would never let my daughter go without. I told my assistant to buy a house for you both. I also left behind a sizable settlement. You really didn't receive any of it? A house? A compensation? This was the first I'd heard of it. But it didn't take long for me to connect the dots. My jaw tightened. Let me guess, you're only saying that now because you're broke and trying to squeeze something out of me. Her eyes flickered with regret, the lines between her brows tightening. Alex, she said quietly, even if I were begging on the street, I would never try to scam you. If there's one person I've truly wronged in this life, it's you. My past with Alice reads like something out of a novel. I was the orphaned son of the man who once saved Mr. Collins's life. When I was 8, the Collins family took me in. Mr. Collins treated me like a son, showering me with affection. Even Mrs. Collins was fond of my quiet, gentle nature. Alice, 2 years older than me, treated me like her little brother. She chased off bullies who tried to pick on me. She took me to parks and zoos, introduced me to the beauty of nature, animals, and life beyond grief. She did everything she could to help me move past the loss of my parents. And me? I buried my feelings for her deep in the pages of my diary. Alex likes Alice. Will Alice ever like Alex back? By my senior year of college, I got my answer. Alice proposed to me. I was stunned, and overjoyed, that she felt the same way. Without hesitation, I married her. What I didn't know was that Mr. Collins had given me 10% of the family company's shares as a wedding gift. But Alice? She had to start from the bottom, working her way up. Turns out, Alice didn't marry me, she married the lifestyle and the future that came with me. While I was lost in the dream of love, cooking for her, ironing her clothes, picking her up from late-night business dinners, she was already drifting away. After Susie was born, she cheated on me with Brian, her charming intern. Brian, who was more than half a year older than me. She told me Brian understood her. That he was her soulmate. That they were the real love story. And me? I was just family to her. Nothing more. Mr. Collins saw right through Brian, recognized the calculating ambition behind his polite smile. He made it crystal clear, Alice would never be allowed to marry him. He would never let Brian step into the Collins legacy. So Alice came up with a compromise. She wouldn't divorce me. I was the buffer, the son-in-law her parents approved of, the man who kept their hearts at ease. But behind closed doors, she gave Brian everything else a husband would have, everything except the marriage certificate. I remember that day vividly. It was just 10 days after Susie was born. For years, I had let Alice call the shots. But that day, I snapped. I grabbed the fruit knife from the counter and, without a second thought, drove it into my own abdomen. Marrying Alice had been the dumbest, most reckless thing I'd ever done. I was young. Naive. Blinded by love. She cheated on me, treated me like a live-in servant, and I took it all, because I thought I deserved it. But if there's one thing I swore I would never allow, it was for her to ruin our daughter the way she ruined me. Alice froze. She was stunned, panicked, horrified, and guilt-stricken. Her hands shook as she pressed them against the wound in my abdomen, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. Alex, please don't die. But I made myself clear, unless she agreed to divorce and gave up custody of Susie, I'd rather die. If she saved me, I'd just try again, until I was gone for good. And once I was dead, Mr. Collins would make Brian's life a living hell. To protect her precious Brian, Alice finally signed the divorce papers. The day I left, she pulled me aside and made one last demand. We'll keep this divorce a secret, she said. On holidays, you still need to play your role in front of my parents. I agreed, but not for free. Sure, I told her. 10 grand per performance. She couldn't stand the humiliation. Her voice turned sharp, her pride snapping under the weight of it. So you really feel nothing for me at all? Is it all just about money now? You'd rather take cash than care? Fine. Then I won't give you a single cent. Let's see how long you last before you come crawling back to me. She meant it. The divorce agreement had a clause about financial compensation. She never paid it. Not a dime. And sure, I struggled. Life got tight. But I pulled myself back up, on my own. I never begged her for anything. Now, thinking back, Alice rubbed her temples as if trying to smooth away the weight of her choices. That was just angry talk, she muttered. I didn't mean to abandon you like that. But your angry words, I said flatly, became the reality I lived through for 4 years. She flinched. Her gaze swept around the apartment again. The furniture wasn't cheap, but nothing screamed luxury either. Brian, as far as I knew, wore socks that cost more than my entire outfit. The clothes I had on, I'd been wearing them for years. Alice raised her phone and dialed her former assistant, Tomas. Ms. Collins, came his voice, polite and cautious. How can I help you? Her tone, almost unconsciously, carried the weight of authority. The house I asked you to purchase in Silverwood Estates 4 years ago, and the $80 million I instructed you to transfer as a settlement, did you personally deliver those to my ex-husband? $80 million? That kind of money would have secured a lifetime of comfort for Susie and me. Tomas hesitated. Well, I think you'd have to ask Mr. Brian about that. Of course. Him again. A bitter wave of fury rose in my chest. Brian already had everything: status, wealth, Alice. And now it seemed he might have even stolen what rightfully belonged to Susie. If he dared touch her share, I'd make sure he paid for it. That evening, at 7 sharp, I brought the birthday cake to the table. Susie's eyes widened with delight, and she let out a high-pitched squeal. Wow, Daddy, you're amazing. I love you so much. Her class group chat lit up with excited messages. Wait, your dad made that himself? It looks even better than the one I had custom-made at the bakery. I'm so jealous. Susie's dad is seriously talented. He sews handmade bags, does fruit carving, and now this cake. Is there anything he can't do? The truth was, over the past 4 years, I'd taken on just about every side hustle imaginable to make ends meet. Susie, grinning from ear to ear, handed out slices of cake herself. The first piece of cake is mine. The second, she handed to Alice. Mommy, this is the first birthday you've ever spent with me. I'm so happy. Alice had been staring blankly at her phone, lost in thought, and only then snapped out of it. She reached for the cake with a smile that felt a bit too theatrical. But I could see right through her. I knew exactly what had her so distracted. Today was also Brian's birthday. Every year, Alice spent this day with him. The fact that my daughter and my rival shared the same birthday wasn't a coincidence. Back when Alice was 9 months pregnant, Brian had grown tired of taunting me from afar, sending photos and messages meant to sting, or mailing me the complimentary trinkets that came with the luxury gifts Alice bought for him, just to humiliate me. That year, he escalated. He showed up at the hospital in person, on his birthday, to provoke me face to face. Alice had given him a pair of wedding rings that day. Promised him a grand, unforgettable wedding. And Brian, in all his arrogance, had come to invite me and my daughter to their future ceremony. I was so furious I lost control. I confronted Alice and exploded in a rage. The moment she realized her little secret had come to light, her emotions spiraled, and she went into labor early. It was the first time Alice ever snapped at Brian. Tears welled in his eyes. I just wanted to be with you openly. And yet, even then, Alice caved. She pulled him into her arms, stroking his back like he was the one who'd been hurt. Brian, don't you understand? I asked him to stay with me, to protect you. Just a wall away, I stood in the delivery room, staring at my newborn daughter, tiny, fragile, barely breathing. All I felt was nausea and despair. That pain, it tore straight through my bones, left me hollowed out. Maybe that's why, when Alice went bankrupt, all I could think was, she deserved it. After dinner, I told her to leave. She looked at me with pitiful eyes. I don't have anywhere else to go. I shoved her toward the door. It's none of my business, go find him. The hallway light flickered on, then off again. Alice stood outside the door for a long time, motionless. Eventually, her body slumped down, her head hanging in defeat as she slid to the floor. The truth was, Brian was the first person she called. In her mind, she'd held him up like a treasure for 4 whole years. Surely, the moment he heard she'd lost everything, he would come running, panic-stricken, desperate to help. All she wanted was for him to prove his loyalty. If he'd just sell one of his properties for her, it would have been enough. A test. And deep down, she hadn't really wanted to make it hard for him. Unfortunately, the moment Brian laid eyes on Alice's cheap outfit, a flicker of disdain crossed his face, subtle, but unmistakable. It pricked something deep inside her, like a needle straight to the heart. He quickly masked it with a smile and stepped aside to let her in. Brian assumed Alice was orchestrating some kind of dramatic birthday surprise. Playing broke, only to reveal a lavish gift or a grand gesture later. That was more her style. But then, his phone lit up with notifications, messages from a group chat filled with Alice's affluent social circle. The Collins family is officially done for. Even her parents fled the country last night. The company's been sold, and they're still $10 billion in debt. Alice won't pay that off in a lifetime. Well, she bought Brian enough houses and designer goods to cover it. He'll just have to get used to being broke with her now. Someone suddenly remembered, Brian was in that group chat, too. A second later, he was removed from the group chat. Damn, someone muttered before he vanished from the chat list. Brian stared at his screen in disbelief, eyes wide. Reality hit him like a brick. The storm was coming, and he needed to protect himself. Your family's bankrupt, he said flatly. What's that got to do with me? We're not even married. Your parents never accepted me. Why the hell should I sell my property for you? Alice's heart raced, pounding so hard she thought she might have misheard him. This was the man she believed to be gentle, thoughtful, the man she'd risked everything for. And now this stranger stood in his place. Brian, what are you saying? Besides a marriage certificate, what haven't I given you? I gave you everything. I gave up my husband, my child, for you. She thought those words would awaken some kind of guilt, maybe even tenderness. But Brian just scoffed. Everything you gave me was voluntary. Ever heard of someone gifting things and then trying to take them back? I've been sleeping with you for 4 years, don't tell me I don't deserve compensation. He leaned in, his voice colder than ever. And honestly, seeing the redness welling in her eyes, he sneered even more. A woman who could throw away her husband and child, do you think I'd ever trust you? You didn't even care about the daughter you nearly died giving birth to. Who's to say you won't treat me the same way the moment another man comes along? Alice swayed on her feet, barely able to stand, but she couldn't find a single word to refute him. Brian scrolled lazily through his phone. Well, since you're useless to me now, I might as well tell you the truth. Ever wonder why your husband was so hell-bent on getting a divorce? He looked up and smirked. From the first time you slept with me, every date, every gift, every intimate moment, I sent him the photos. All of them. Directly to him. Alice's mind went blank, as if a bomb had gone off inside her head. He actually held out pretty well, Brian continued. I pushed him to the edge, drove him into a mental breakdown before he finally snapped. I'm not like him, I'd never be some idiot playing house for free, cooking your meals, raising your kid. So. Alex had known. He had given her chances, so many chances. And she had thrown them all away. Brian didn't bother keeping up the act anymore. Come on, Alice, he said with a sigh. When I joined the company, I studied your entire social media history. Your likes, your dislikes, I memorized it all. Every little connection you thought we had. That was just me feeding you pre-rehearsed lines to keep you hooked. Do you know how exhausting it was pretending to care? Alice snapped. Her hands flew to his throat, fingers tightening in a fury she could no longer contain. You used me for my money. You tricked me, destroyed my marriage, nearly cost me my child. My father was right, you're nothing but poison. But before she could say another word, building security, called in by Brian, stormed in and dragged her out. Just like that, she was tossed onto the street. It was late June, but Alice was shivering from head to toe. At this time, a group chat named His True Heart sounded. Some of the same people who'd been gossiping earlier had now come to see the drama unfold for themselves. Alice, so, was that all part of the plan? Did Brian rush to sell his house to save you yet? One of them teased. Alice's fingers trembled as she typed her reply with forceful clarity. My husband is Alex. I'm going back to him. The next morning at 7:20, I opened my front door. A familiar figure was slumped across the doorstep. I stepped right over Alice's waist without a glance. Susie, backpack slung over her tiny shoulders, skipped cheerfully past her. Alice rubbed her bleary eyes and scrambled to her feet, trailing behind us. Without hesitation, she reached for Susie's hand like it still belonged to her. I moved, instinctively ready to pull Susie away. But Susie beamed with a wide, innocent smile. Mommy, can you wait by the school gate a little longer today? I want everyone to see that I have a mom. That way, they won't talk behind Daddy's back, and those women won't try to chase after him. Susie. I cut her off sharply. Alice looked at me, sadness in her eyes. I used to be softer than a sloth, mild, easygoing, always yielding. Now, I'd become sharp, guarded, unflinching. She could imagine, just barely, how much hardship, how many humiliations I must have endured to become someone so different. Alice scooped Susie into her arms. All right, sweetheart. Not just for a little while, Mommy's going to stay with you and Daddy every day from now on. Then she reached out her hand, trying to hold mine. I stepped aside. Filthy. At the school entrance, Alice's presence caused a small commotion. Susie, is that your mom? She's stunning. She and your dad look like such a perfect match. Why does your dad look so serious, though? He didn't even say a word to her. I wanted no part in the spectacle. But for now, I needed her help with the house situation, so I tolerated her company. We took the bus. I headed straight for the back row and sat alone. Alice sat down next to me. The moment the bus started moving, I got up and switched seats without a word. She clearly wasn't used to public transportation. As she stood to follow, a sudden jolt threw her backward. She hit her head against the metal pole. I couldn't help but curl my lips into a cold, mocking smile. When we finally arrived at the address Alice had given me, the house she claimed had been mine, we found it occupied by an elderly couple. But the moment they saw Alice, they lit up with joy and pulled her inside. It all made sense now. They were Brian's parents. Alice stood frozen, completely stunned. I laughed, quietly, bitterly. What more was there to figure out? Brian had taken over the house meant for Susie and me, used it as a retirement villa for his parents. The place was massive, over 3,000 square feet of polished marble floors, state-of-the-art smart appliances in every room. A dozen beautifully designed bedrooms. Even their dog had its own room. Meanwhile, in the apartment I rented, Susie slept in the master bedroom, but even that was barely 150 square feet. We had to make the most of vertical space just to fit everything. Over there, the kitchen came with a food processor, an automatic stir-fry machine, a dishwasher, everything designed to make life easier. But me? I spent hours slicing fruit at a grocery stand until my arms went numb and my fingers cramped from the strain. Then I'd come home, push through the pain, and still cook dinner. The more I thought about it, the tighter my chest grew, until I had to crouch down, gasping for breath. For years of exhaustion surged through me all at once, like a tidal wave breaking loose. The first year after the divorce was the hardest. The lowest point of my life. Big companies took one look at me, single dad, 3-month-old baby, and politely declined. No one wanted the burden. So I settled for day jobs, whatever paid cash on the spot. I worked at small shops with lenient rules just so I could bring Susie with me. At 1 year old, Susie was sick all the time. Every penny I earned vanished before I could hold on to it. So I took on more shifts, more jobs, anything I could find. When I was too tired, I chugged coffee to stay awake. Sometimes I'd clock out of one job and head straight into the next without even a minute of sleep in between. I had no support system. No one to lean on. Not even a single family member who could help me carry the weight. My mental state felt like a rubber band stretched to the breaking point. Alice knelt beside me, her voice trembling with concern. Alex, don't think like that. I'm here now. But the truth was, every storm in my life had started with her. If she hadn't lost everything, if she weren't completely broke and abandoned, would she have remembered the bond we once shared? Alice looked more rattled than I'd ever seen her. She grabbed my shoulders, trying to lift me upright, her hands trembling with urgency. I gasped for air, chest heaving like a man on the verge of drowning. She panicked. You need a hospital. I weakly pointed across the street. Just, get me a coffee. She dashed over and returned with a steaming cup. I took a few sips. The warmth settled into my chest, and my breathing began to steady. I knew what this was, an episode from stress-induced anxiety. As long as I ate or drank something, I could usually pull myself back. Alice stared at me, stunned. Then, almost childlike, she offered, then, let me take you out for something really good to eat. Wearing those knockoff sneakers and clutching her frayed handbag, she started toward a fancy restaurant nearby. I caught her by the wrist and pulled her back. Aren't you broke? You should be saving every penny. Her confident stride faltered, and she awkwardly adjusted her clothes, like she'd just remembered her own circumstances. So I chose a fast food place down the block. Alice hesitated at the door, visibly conflicted. Can food this cheap even be safe to eat? I didn't blame her. She and Brian used to order takeout that cost $3,000 a meal. Now here she was, staring down a value menu. But in the end, she finished 2 full bowls of rice. Afterward, I said, call Tomas. Ask him, whose names are on the deed for that house. A moment later, she hung up, nodding. It's under your name. Yours and Susie's. Finally, the weight in my chest lifted. Fortunately, Secretary Tomas is reliable. As soon as we finished eating, I headed straight for the property registration office. 40 minutes later, I walked out with the official title in hand. Property owners, Alex and Susie. For the first time in years, I felt grounded, steady. Then I turned around and made my way to the electronics store. An hour later, I knocked on the door of the villa. I'm sorry, I said calmly, holding up the property deed. This house legally belongs to me and my daughter. Your son has occupied it through fraudulent means for the past 4 years. I'm asking you to vacate the premises as soon as possible. I chose civility out of respect, because Brian's parents had never treated me harshly. But the moment they saw the title with my name and Susie's printed clearly across the top, their faces turned ashen. They hurried to call Brian. How could you do this? His father barked into the phone. You told us Alice gave us this house out of gratitude. You said she wanted to honor us. I've never taken a single thing that didn't belong to me, not in my entire life. And now you've brought shame on our whole family. Alice spoke up quietly, I never gave you this house. I added the final blow. Your son didn't just steal this home. He also had an affair with my wife while she was pregnant. He's the reason my marriage fell apart. After the divorce, the settlement and this house, both intended for me and my daughter, were taken by him without our consent. That's the home you've been living in. My daughter and I have paid the price for 4 years. Brian's father stared at me in shock, his hands trembling. Then he began pounding his fists against his thighs in anguish. I didn't stop there. I pulled out my phone and showed him the messages Brian had sent me, years of smug, taunting texts and photos. I had saved every single one of them. Alice turned away, her ears burning red with shame. Funny how people who cheat are the first to feel embarrassed when their betrayal is exposed. The chat logs were vile, Brian, arrogant and vulgar, dripping with cruelty. His father's face turned purple with fury. He looked like he might collapse from rage. I raised a shameless bastard, he shouted toward the ceiling, his voice cracking. A disgrace to this family. Then, before I could stop him, he fell to his knees in front of me. Young man, let me apologize to you properly. I rushed to lift him up. Please, sir, you don't have to do that. Brian hadn't arrived yet. There was still time. But when he finally walked through the door, what greeted him wasn't warmth or sympathy. It was the full force of his father's fury, delivered in a flurry of blistering slaps. Even after the blows and humiliation, Brian held his head high. So what if I stole his woman and his house, he sneered. There's no such thing as fairness in this world. What, am I supposed to live like you, some self-righteous pauper pretending to have principles? He looked at Alice and me without a hint of guilt, in fact, with smug satisfaction. Even without this house, I've still got 4 properties, 2 luxury cars, $200 million in the bank, and more designer goods than I can count. In this room, I'm the richest one here. He chuckled, arrogant and loud. You, one bankrupt, one low-wage worker, how exactly do you plan to beat me? You think you can afford lawyers? Think you can outlast me in court? Brian was, without question, the most shameless man I'd ever met. Without him, my daughter could have grown up with comfort, with dignity, like a little princess. But he kept ranting, louder and bolder. Alex, I'll give you a deal. Drop to your knees and bow to me 100 times, and maybe, I'll spare you and your daughter. Brian's parents collapsed to their knees instead, tears streaming down their faces as they bowed toward me, over and over. This is a sin, we owe you everything. We failed you, we failed to raise our child right. We'll move out immediately. Brian stood frozen, stunned silent. I said nothing to stop his parents. I didn't tell them to stand up. Instead, I looked directly at Brian, mimicking the same arrogant posture he had moments ago. See that? You hurt me and my daughter without remorse, so now your parents are the ones paying the price. That's karma. There's nothing wrong with ambition. But real ambition is about drive and integrity, not cutting corners and abandoning decency. What you've taken from others isn't truly yours. It's borrowed, always at risk of being taken back. Brian's face darkened, twice over. I had a strong suspicion now, there was no way Alice had willingly handed over all those cars and properties. No matter how blinded she'd been, no one gives that much away without being manipulated. So I twisted the knife deeper. You ever wonder why you still don't have a kid? Maybe it's because you've done too much wrong in this life. The last time I visited this villa, I noticed something, a bottle of pills in the bathroom cabinet. I recognized them immediately, fertility medication, prescribed for male infertility. As the word sank in, Brian's face twisted with rage and embarrassment. He lunged at me, ready to strike. But Alice stepped in at the last second, grabbing his wrist and holding him back. That was all she did. Just that, nothing more. Brian chuckled under his breath, looking at me with smug confidence, like he'd already won. And why wouldn't he? Alice had always been on his side. Her loyalty to him was unwavering, almost blind. I remembered clearly the last time I forced Brian's head into a toilet and made him drink the water. Alice had stormed in, furious, and shoved me so hard I slammed into the bathroom counter. I collapsed to the floor, the pain so sharp I couldn't stand for 5 minutes. She didn't even look at me, just rushed to Brian's side and helped him out the door like he was the one who'd been wronged. Right or wrong, Alice had always left me standing alone. My eyes dimmed. I had long stopped expecting anything from her. But just once, I had hoped she'd stand up for her daughter, if not for me. And then, out of nowhere, she said something that stunned the entire room. Alex, I've got him. Go ahead, hit him. Hit him until you feel better. Everyone went still. Brian's face stiffened in disbelief. Alice, what the hell are you saying? You're really going to help him beat me up? Alice gave a cold, twisted smile and pinned his arms behind his back. You think this is bullying? What about everything you've done to Alex and Susie? You deserve a hell of a lot more than a few punches. I didn't know what had suddenly made her switch sides, but I didn't ask questions. I raised my hand and slapped him. Once. Twice. 10 times. Each strike landed with a crisp echo. Brian's father was still kneeling on the floor, silently watching. His mother tried to intervene, but he stopped her with a stern glare. This is your fault, Brian's father snapped. You're the one who kept feeding him those rotten ideas. Look at what he's done to that poor man's wife, how can you defend that? What he owes, he'll pay. He's an adult, he can face the consequences himself. Brian was fuming inside, humiliated and furious, but couldn't break free from Alice's grip. His eyes reddened, filled with bitterness. His parents, his girlfriend, no one stood by him now. Abandoned by everyone. This was what it looked like. Moments later, the police showed up. I anticipated that Brian would be difficult, so I called the police ahead of time. I showed the officers the newly issued property ownership certificate. Brian, wide-eyed and seething, had no choice but to accept the truth. As he turned to leave, I grabbed his arm one last time. What about the $80 million? Or do you want me to report fraud next? His lips tightened. Give me a few days. I'll figure something out, he muttered before slinking away, dragging his parents behind him. Back at the apartment, I started packing up our things. Susie was taping up boxes with her little hands, clumsily but enthusiastically. Daddy, we're moving. Let's go say goodbye to Aunt Monica. Aunt Monica? Alice repeated, surprised. Alice, who had been dragging a heavy suitcase behind me, stopped dead in her tracks. She turned, her expression sharp and questioning. Monica who? She asked, her voice laced with suspicion. I had no idea where this sudden jealousy was coming from. If it weren't for the fact that the $80 million still hadn't landed in my account, I would have kicked her out right then and there. Of course, Alice ended up tagging along to Monica's place. Monica was 27. No bad habits, just a soft spot for good food. I brought some fruit as a token gesture and quietly slipped an envelope of cash beneath her couch cushions, my way of thanking her for everything she'd done over the past few years. Monica's eyes shimmered with emotion, a reluctant sadness behind her smile. Alex, leave me your new address, will you? She said softly. So I can stop by and visit you and Susie sometime. I didn't hesitate, I sent it to her through social media. Later that night, after Susie had fallen asleep, Alice finally asked what had been simmering in her mind all evening. That Monica girl, the way she looks at you isn't normal. Don't tell me there's nothing going on between you two. Typical Alice, always quick to judge, always holding others to standards she never applied to herself. And even if there was something going on, it wasn't her place to question it anymore. Monica does like me, I said bluntly. But whatever there is between us, it's nothing like what you had with Brian. Not that filthy mess you called love. The word stung. I could see it on her face. But she didn't argue, because she couldn't. What she had with Brian was filthy. And she knew it. I opened my hands, palms up, showing her the hardened calluses etched into my skin. Alice. I'm not invincible. These hands? They don't do everything. I don't know how to fix wiring. I can't lift heavy furniture. No matter how careful I am, I still get sick sometimes. Monica, she's helped me. Over and over. She's watched Susie for me more times than I can count. She's pulled me through when I was barely holding on. I bought her meals, gave her gifts, not because I owed her anything, but because I appreciated her. And the reason I never outright rejected her feelings, is because I didn't have the strength to push away kindness. Alice's expression shifted from accusation to guilt. Because deep down, she knew, if she'd ever fulfilled her role as a wife or a mother, I wouldn't have needed anyone else to step in. After a pause, her voice softened. You said she saved you. What happened to you? Funny how everything always seemed to come back to her in some way. It was the first Christmas after the divorce, I said quietly. I was delivering food non-stop, day and night. I barely slept. That night, there was a fireworks show downtown. I was rushing another order when my scooter skidded on the road. I flew off and landed several feet away. I remember lying there on the cold pavement, blood pooling under my head, fireworks bursting above me. And then I saw it. Scrawled across the sky in glowing pyrotechnic letters, Brian, I'll love you in the new year, too. I closed my eyes right then. I didn't want to wake up again. But fate had other plans. A pair of arms caught me, held me. I told the person not to worry. Said I just needed a moment. That I'd be fine after I rested. Maybe it was the reckless way I worked myself to exhaustion. Maybe it was the way I looked when she took off my helmet. Either way, Monica, who worked as a baker, did something no one else had done for me in a long time. She drove me to the hospital. She paid for my medical bills. She brought me hot food and stayed by my side. The kindness of a stranger got me through one of the loneliest, hardest nights of my life. Later, we talked and discovered we lived only a few blocks apart. After I was discharged, Monica started creating coincidences, bumping into me at the grocery store, outside Susie's preschool, even at the bus stop. Each time, I played along, acting surprised. Of all the women who tried to get close to me, Monica was the most sincere, the most careful and considerate. But unfortunately, I no longer believed in romance. All I ever wanted was for Susie to have a strong, kind woman in her life. Someone she could look up to. Someone with integrity. Alice listened in silence, her face flushing red, then paling again, caught between shame and regret. I'm sorry, she whispered. I really was a selfish mess. I never thought about what either of you needed. You've carried all of this alone. From now on, I'll take care of you both, properly. I gave her a quiet smile and said nothing. Then turned and went into the bedroom to sleep. Alice didn't seem discouraged. That night, she updated the group chat, his true love, with her progress. Level up, he let me have the couch tonight, and even took me out for a meal. Tomorrow, I'll keep pushing. The chat exploded with congratulations. One person, who apparently knew me well, added a message that cut deeper than any of them realized. You should have done this a long time ago. When Alex was your husband, he could have been like Brian, demanding money, cars, real estate. But he never did. All he ever wanted, was you. And you're the one who made sure he lost everything. In the middle of the night, half asleep, I received a text message. Alex, I love you so much. I rolled over and muttered, idiot, before drifting back to sleep. The next morning, Alice was up early, bright and eager. She happily ran out to buy breakfast, then helped Susie brush her hair and get ready for school. During the move, she busied herself with packing, lifting, organizing, doing everything she could to keep me from lifting a finger. I could guess her motive. She wanted to stay. She had nowhere else to go, no money for rent, no backup plan. This large apartment had plenty of extra rooms. Letting her stay temporarily seemed harmless enough. Besides, the $80 million she owed me still hadn't arrived. But instead of money, what came next was something far worse, a storm of public outrage. That day, just as I stepped outside, I was ambushed. A group of people surrounded me, throwing punches and kicking me to the ground. Someone had spray-painted hateful messages in red across my front door. The entrance was littered with trash, reeking and disgusting. Susie, crying, tried to run to me, but one of them shoved her down. Alice rushed out, locking Susie safely inside the house before charging into the crowd, physically wrestling with them to get them off me. That's when I found out what had sparked it all. A video had gone viral online, secretly recorded, heavily edited, with no context at all. It showed Brian's elderly parents kneeling in front of me while I stood there, appearing to mock and humiliate them. From the way it was cut, it looked like I was abusing defenseless seniors. Brian, swollen face and all, went live on social media with dramatic flair. He claimed I'd assaulted him, subjected him to vigilante violence, and forced his aging parents out onto the street, all while extorting him for $80 million. He even leaked my home address on the air. And that's what brought today's chaos to my doorstep. Now I understood clearly, he never intended to return the money. He just wanted to make my life hell. To scare me. To punish me for daring to fight back. The image of two elderly people kneeling and bowing was explosive, designed to provoke. And I knew it. If Brian's parents insisted on playing the victims, no matter what I said, public opinion would tear me apart. Once I realized that, I acted fast. I called the police and submitted a report. The attackers were arrested within hours. Then I took the next step. I created a new account and uploaded a full, unedited video, 3 hours long. It documented everything that happened that day in crystal clear detail. Every sound, every word. I had spent a long time picking out a micro-surveillance camera at the electronics store, just in case something like this ever happened. That day, before anything started, I discreetly placed it on the bookshelf across from the couch. After 4 years of dealing with con men, thugs, and manipulators, I'd learned to protect myself. Once the footage went public, the tide of public opinion turned instantly. Brian, who had tried to play the victim and manipulate everyone's sympathy, was shredded by the internet. So the real story is, the husband beat the homewrecker, and the homeowner kicked out the squatter. Honestly, I'd have hit harder. This guy's disgusting. Using his own parents like pawns? He has zero shame. Bottom feeders like this shouldn't even be allowed to call themselves human. But I wasn't done yet. I recorded a full screen capture of every message Brian had ever sent me, for years of cruel taunts and provocations. Then I paired the evidence with photos and a detailed timeline of what Susie and I had endured, every hardship, every indignity. I could have exposed Alice's betrayal long ago. But I hadn't, for one reason only, out of respect for Mr. and Mrs. Collins. I didn't want to stain their family name or bring disgrace to Mr. Collins's company. They had treated me with kindness, like true parents. I owed them that much. But now the company was gone. They had left the country. And the scandal could no longer touch them. I had nothing left to hold me back. If Brian was determined to destroy me, then I'd make sure he didn't walk away from the wreckage. After disconnecting Susie's access to the internet, so she wouldn't see any of this, I hit publish. Brian's comment section exploded, again. My God. Stealing a man's wife wasn't enough? He even hijacked the daughter's house and settlement money? This guy is beyond shameless. You really enjoyed sending those bedroom photos to her husband? Did your parents never teach you what shame is? Brian went into hiding for days, too afraid to show his face. And it wasn't just him. The backlash spread like wildfire, to Alice, and to the entire Collins family. I screenshotted all the messages between the homewrecker and the mistress. Look at this. While the original wife and daughter were struggling to survive, those two were off vacationing in luxury. The watch on that mistress's wrist alone could have supported the father and daughter for 4 years. Seriously, you sat in a 5-star steakhouse eating a meal worth tens of thousands while your daughter couldn't even afford baby formula? Your husband was an orphan, and you and your lover still bullied him like that? Do you even have a conscience? Oh wait, clearly not. No woman with a soul cheats while she's pregnant. The hate came like a tidal wave. Alice sat right beside me when it hit. I didn't say a word as she broke down in tears, slapping herself, downing glass after glass of whiskey like it might drown out the noise. I didn't get it. I was the one who suffered. I was the one who'd been dragged through hell. And yet, I hadn't cried. So what exactly was she crying for? Was it because Brian was finally being torn apart by the public? Was that what broke her? In contrast, my own comments section was calm, filled with messages of comfort and quiet encouragement. I remember him from 3 years ago. He worked at my store. Always brought his little girl. He'd eat nothing but bread and bottled water so he could give her everything she needed. That kid never whined or made a fuss. They were both strong as hell. Did you get your house back? What about the settlement? If that bastard doesn't pay, we'll go get it for you. One by one, I responded. And somehow, through the screen, their kindness gave me strength. Raw, unfiltered, human strength. Even the men who had attacked me earlier came to my door with apologies and compensation. They fixed the damage, brought gifts for Susie, and confessed they'd been misled, manipulated by a twisted sympathy. Brian's front door was never quiet again. People came knocking day and night, some to beat him, others hoping to cash in on the chaos. He lived in constant fear, flinching at every sound. Someone even set up multiple speakers around the neighborhood, looping a single line through the air. Has Brian paid back the money today? Another person rented the apartment directly across from his and installed high-definition cameras, live-streaming his every move, 24/7. Eventually, someone actually broke down his front door and gave him a brutal beating right in his own living room. His parents, once respected among friends and neighbors, became social pariahs, mocked, shunned, avoided. His father ended up in the hospital from the stress. Then Brian did what I'd been expecting all along, he messaged me privately, begging for mercy. But mercy came with terms. It's simple, I replied. Pay me back, all of it. Not just the $80 million. I want every dollar she spent on you before the divorce. Every hotel bill. Every gift. Every lie you cashed in on. And second, public apology. On camera. 3 days later, I received a bank transfer, $85.04 million. And a video apology, Brian, face to camera, red-eyed and humiliated. I figured that was enough. The debt was paid. The punishment had landed. So I posted on social media, calling for calm. I told everyone it was time to move on. Finally, Brian caught a breath. But his relief didn't last long. Because just as things started to quiet down, another video dropped, this time from Alice. And it reignited everything. In her video, she told the full truth about her affair with Brian. No excuses, no sugarcoating. She admitted Brian had targeted her from the moment he joined the company. That he studied her interests, engineered coincidences, carefully mirrored her tastes, just to get closer to her. Even though he knew she was married, he pursued her relentlessly. Flirting. Manipulating. Slowly breaking down her resolve. And she gave in. Again and again. Even during her pregnancy. She said Brian had poisoned her mind, made her believe lies, pushed her into mistake after mistake. But most of all, she said she regretted hurting the one person who had truly loved her. After everything, Alice finally understood who truly mattered in her life. She said from this day forward, she would make things right, not through words, but through actions. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She just wanted to make amends, to her daughter, and to me. To fulfill the responsibilities she had long neglected, as a wife, and more importantly, as a mother. She even asked the public to hold her accountable. The comment section was split down the middle, half filled with brutal insults, the other half cautiously watching, waiting to see if she meant what she said. Alice started treating me with remarkable kindness. But kindness alone wasn't enough. One night, I poured her a drink and placed it in front of her. Do you know, I asked quietly, why Brian dared to take everything from Susie and me? The glass paused at her lips. Because I didn't know right from wrong, she said softly. Because I always took his side. I shook my head. No. It's because no matter what he did, no matter how deeply he hurt us, he never faced a single consequence. Alice stared at me for a long moment, and then downed the drink in one swallow. 2 days later, she filed a lawsuit against Brian, demanding repayment of every dollar she had spent on him. The legal team she hired was fierce, relentless. I asked her how she could afford it. They offered to represent me for free, she said. They want the exposure. A high-profile case like this, it's a great way to build their reputation. The house, the cars, the designer goods, Brian managed to cough up part of it. But his lifestyle had always been lavish and unsustainable. What he had taken, he now had to pay back, down to the last cent. And when he couldn't? There were other consequences waiting for him. Alice gave Brian one last gift, handcuffs and a cage. The internet roared with applause. For once, justice felt satisfying. Alice sold off all the things she recovered from him. Said she didn't want to keep anything that reeked of him. Then handed me the money, hoping to make amends. But I gave it right back. I already have more than enough, I told her. The 80 million is plenty. Your family's bankrupt, use the money to settle your debts. Or start a small business. Do something honest. And bring your parents home, they've been struggling overseas long enough. Alice was stunned by my response. She didn't expect it. But the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. Because I had always loved Mr. and Mrs. Collins. And I still did. Alice accepted the money with a faint smile. All right, then let's call it a loan. She took a screenshot of our conversation and posted it in the group chat. He gave me the money. Reactions came flooding in. Where do you even find a husband like that? Seriously, were you blind when you let him go? Alex went through hell these past years. You really owe him. Don't screw this up again. The group name, His True Love, felt more ironic than ever. Could deception ever truly be exchanged for genuine love? A few days later, Alice confessed something else. She had been pretending to be broke. She said it was all a test, for me and for Brian. I was surprised, but not upset. If anything, it was good news. Mr. and Mrs. Collins were safe. Brian had finally been unmasked. Susie had her mother back. So I asked her, what was the wager? A pair of rings, she said. Worth over $50 million. Since I helped you win, you owe me the prize. Alice beamed when she saw I wasn't angry. Of course, Alex, she said sweetly, slipping her hand around my wrist, only to realize I wasn't wearing anything. That afternoon, she dragged me to the mall. She shopped freely, buying whatever caught her eye. I let her. I even humored her with a few compliments, just like Brian used to do. She practically lit up with joy. She spent money like it was water, but for once, I didn't mind. I was dressed in a tailored suit, exuding calm confidence. Alice snapped photos and posted them online. Comments poured in. Now this is more like it. If you want to make things right, this is the standard, keep it up. We'll be watching. And in the days that followed, Susie and I traveled, just the two of us. We visited places we'd only dreamed of. And gradually, people online began to relax. The storm passed. When I saw the Collins Group's public image improving, and their stock prices recovering, I finally exhaled in peace. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Collins. When the bet officially ended, I received the ring. And just like that, I was pulled into Alice's group chat, again. Wearing that ring, I went to meet the person Alice had originally planned to give it to. Brian looked pale and gaunt, a fresh bruise still visible on his forehead. I spoke first. Did you know Alice faked her bankruptcy? The whole thing was just a test, to see where your loyalty really stood. He froze for a moment, 2 seconds of stunned silence, before erupting. What are you talking about? He snapped. That's not possible. Everyone kicked her out of their circles. I even went to her company, there was a new CEO. She hired them, I said simply. Brian shook his head violently, like trying to shake off a nightmare. Then his eyes dropped to my clothes, tailored suit, polished shoes, a luxury watch. He understood instantly. This was the uniform of the victor. So you passed her test, he said bitterly. You agreed to pay off her debts? Unbelievable. A fool's luck, I guess. I smiled faintly and changed the subject. Truth is, you're not without talent. If you just worked for what you wanted, you could have done well on your own. Hell, you might have avoided prison altogether. But you gambled on a shortcut, and lost. Women? I added casually. They'll always choose themselves in the end. Brian smirked, but the sarcasm quickly gave way to something more fragile. His eyes welled up, and 2 silent tears traced down his cheeks. I didn't even plan to take the house or the money at first, he said, voice cracking. But I couldn't stand it. She was in my bed, but warning me not to let you find out. Can you imagine that? She claimed you forced the divorce, yet she still hesitated to sign the papers. Even after it was all over, she gave you the money. Not me. When you left, she cried. Alone. He laughed bitterly, shaking his head, lost in the chaos of his own emotions. And in that moment, I understood. No wonder you lost, I said quietly. No wonder you kept doing such stupid things. Because somewhere, maybe not much, maybe just a little, but Brian had fallen in love with Alice. And as for why Alice treated me so well now? Maybe it was because, in the year I loved her the most, she handed me a stack of legal documents, told me it was the wedding planning binder. I didn't even look. I signed it right then and there. Because I loved her. I would have handed over everything I had, just to support her, just to see her succeed. Alice had always known one thing. I never cared about money. I only ever cared about her. But what did it matter? She still chose someone else in the end. Now that she's trying to come back to me, it's only because she's finally realized what real love is worth. But the truth is, my love for her ended long ago. It ended the moment I saw my fragile, kitten-thin daughter being wheeled away on a stretcher, while Alice and Brian stood in the hallway, wrapped in each other's arms. That's when it stopped. Completely. Near the end of summer, Alice handed me a document. Her palm was pressed over the top half. "Susie's transfer papers," she said, her tone soft, smile light. "You just need to sign at the bottom." But I clearly saw words like 20%, shares, gift peeking out between her fingers. Still, I played along, pretended not to care, signed it without hesitation. She slipped the papers into my bag, then looked at me with a gaze full of affection. I knew what was coming next. The setup was perfect, for her to bring up reconciliation. "Thank you," I said calmly. Then, all of a sudden, Alice stepped forward and hugged me tightly. "Alex. I want to be with you," she whispered. "You know I love you. When we divorced, it wasn't because of Brian. I was afraid you'd hurt yourself again. You chose death over me, I had my pride, too. I wanted to come back to you, but, how could I lower myself enough to ask?" Her words were absurd, so absurd they made me laugh. She was never torn between two men. She just wanted both. She was greedy. And what had haunted her for 4 years, wasn't love. It was frustration that I had made the choice first, and never turned back. But me? I had already let it all go. "Alice," I said gently, "I used to think what I felt for you was love. But now I know, it was something closer to family. You'll always be a part of my life, but as family." She shook her head, almost desperately. No, it's not like that. You still love me, I can feel it. You're just broken, Alex. You've been through too much. But we can fix it. We just need time to find our way back to how things used to be." I looked at her, expression calm, voice steady. "Tell me, Alice, if Brian had passed your little test, you never would have called me that day, would you?" She opened her mouth, searching for a denial, but none came. Because she had imagined that scenario, too. And she knew the answer. I gave a slight nod, already emotionally detached. "I should go. Susie needs me, we have school prep to do." As I walked out, I heard her voice faintly behind me. "If I didn't love you, why would I have married you in the first place?" Maybe that was something she needed to believe. But it was no longer my burden to carry. All I knew was this: those 20% shares came with annual dividends in the billions. I discovered the group chat, His True Love, the day Alice broke down, crying under the weight of online hatred. She had drunk far too much, passed out cold on the couch. And then her phone lit up. A message popped up. "Alice, things are getting out of hand. Is the loyalty test still on?" Something compelled me to keep reading. I never expected that my birthday could unlock her lock. And just like that, I learned the truth behind their little game. I saw how Brian had lost favor, because he failed the challenge. So I knew, I couldn't lose. I understood Alice well. With her kind of generosity, if I gave something up, she'd give me something even bigger in return. And so, I performed. Played the role of the man who saw money as dirt. And it worked. Alice trusted me completely. How ridiculous it all was, these spoiled heirs to fortune, playing emotional games. He called their chat group His True Love. What was love worth, really? How much did true love cost? Nothing weighed more than money. Money meant freedom. Security. Power. Confidence. The ability to choose. On the way home, I bought myself a new suit. I'd need it next week, my first day stepping into a leadership role. Yesterday, Mr. Collins had handed me a reward, an executive position at one of the branch offices. As I passed a toy store, I picked up a bear-shaped building block set, the one Susie had been eyeing for weeks. On the way home, I thought about how to explain to her that her mom would now simply be her aunt. But Susie took it better than I ever could have imagined. "It's okay," she said softly. "Because Mommy's a traitor, right? She gave up on Uncle Brian, and she gave up on me. And she didn't choose you, either. So that means the most important person isn't Mommy, it's Daddy. And I'm Daddy's most important person too." I didn't expect a 4-year-old to say something so clear, so heartbreakingly wise. I knelt down and hugged her tight. She would be my princess. I'd pave her road with everything I had. Alice, meanwhile, was heartbroken. She stayed in her villa for a long time, eventually retreating to her parents' house. They were out in the garden, sunbathing in the soft afternoon light. Alice walked straight upstairs, into what had once been my room. She opened the drawers. There wasn't much inside. An old eraser from grade school. A pair of glasses from high school. A simple ring I'd bought with my summer job earnings. And a few journals. She pulled them out, one by one. She read through my childhood memories, smiled at the scribbles and drawings. But as the pages turned, the tone shifted. The entries became love letters. Page after page, filled with unspoken feelings, the silent yearning of a boy too scared to speak his heart. The more she read, the blurrier her vision became. Until the very last page. There was only one line. "Alex likes Alice. Will Alice ever like Alex?" 18-year-old Alex had reached across time to ask 28-year-old Alice a single question. Her fingers trembled as she reached for something to respond. She subconsciously wanted to write down that word. But unfortunately, she didn't have a pen. She opened the other 2 drawers, but there was no pen either.